The smell of roasted turkey, mingled with the faint scent of pine from the towering Christmas tree, filled the dining room of our family's grand Victorian mansion. Snow fell softly outside the tall, arched windows, casting a deceptively serene backdrop to what I knew would be anything but a peaceful Christmas dinner. I'm Alexander Bennett, though my family insists on calling me Alex, their subtle way of diminishing everything about me, right down to my very name. At 29, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings and the only one who chose to remain in the family home after graduating college, not out of necessity, but out of strategy, a calculated decision my brother Timothy was about to learn the hard way. The antique grandfather clock, its polished mahogany gleaming in the candlelight, struck 6 o'clock with a deep, resonant chime. Our housekeeper, Maria, glided into the room, carrying the last of the side dishes, creamy mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, and a steaming dish of green beans almondine. She caught my eye briefly, a knowing look passing between us like a silent pact. Maria had been with our family for 30 years, long enough to witness every drama, every betrayal, unfold within these walls, including the one about to erupt tonight. Alex, my mother, Margaret, called from her end of the polished mahogany table, her voice laced with that familiar note of perpetual disappointment. Do try to sit up straight. The Hendersons are joining us later for dessert. Her words carried the weight of the Bennett legacy, as if my posture alone could tarnish our family's carefully curated reputation. I adjusted my position slightly, smoothing the crisp linen napkin across my lap. The Hendersons, of course, Mother's latest attempt to orchestrate a suitable match for me with their son, Bradley, another eligible bachelor I was supposedly fortunate to attract despite my so-called peculiarities, as she often described my career choices. Timothy sat across from me, his wife, Diane, at his side, both dressed as if they'd stepped out of a luxury fashion magazine. He'd taken over Father's investment firm 3 years ago, a position he neither earned nor deserved. But in our family, being the firstborn son trumped trivial matters like competence or integrity. My sister, Catherine, sat near the end of the table, her fingers tapping furiously at her phone despite Mother's repeated, pointed glares. Catherine had burned through 2 trust funds and 3 marriages, yet somehow retained her title as the sensible daughter because she at least attempted to settle down. Before we could begin, Father stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding as always. I think it's time we address the elephant in the room, he announced, setting down his wine glass with the precision of a man accustomed to control. The future of this house. Here it was, the moment I'd been anticipating for precisely 3 years, 2 months, and 15 days. As you all know, he continued, his voice measured but heavy with implication, this property has been in the Bennett family for 4 generations. However, with recent changes in the market, certain decisions must be made. What he meant, though I dared not say it aloud just yet, was that his investment firm, now Timothy's investment firm, had lost several major clients, the kind of losses that sparked whispers at country club gatherings, the kind that forced the sale of cherished family assets. Timothy leaned forward, unable to contain the smirk curling his lips. What Father's trying to say, Alex, is that it's time for you to find your own place. We're selling the house. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, letting the moment stretch, savoring the tension that hung in the air like a storm about to break. Is that so? I asked calmly. Don't act surprised, Catherine chimed in, finally looking up from her phone, her voice dripping with condescension. You can't have expected to live here forever. Some of us have actual families to think about. By actual families, she meant her latest fiancé and his 3 children from 2 previous marriages, a fiancé who, unbeknownst to her, had already squandered most of her remaining trust fund on a failed yacht charter business in Miami. The market's quite favorable right now, Timothy continued, his tone smug, a tone he'd perfected since childhood. I have several interested buyers already, high-end developers. They'll likely tear it down. Build luxury condominiums. Mother's hand flew to her throat, her pearl necklace glinting in the chandelier's light. Tear it down, she gasped, her voice trembling. But, Timothy, darling, this house is. Just a house, Mother, he cut her off sharply. Progress demands change. Besides, Alex needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. I set down my water glass with care, the crystal clinking softly against the table. That's interesting, Tim, I said, my voice steady, almost conversational. Tell me more about these developers. He preened slightly, always eager to flaunt his supposed business acumen. Prestigious firms, top dollar, of course. You wouldn't understand the complexities of such deals. Actually, I said, reaching for the sleek leather briefcase beside my chair, I understand completely. That's why I had my team research them thoroughly 3 months ago when they first approached me. The room went still, the air thick with sudden unease. Father's voice, usually so steady, carried the first note of uncertainty I'd heard in years. Your team, he asked. I smiled, pulling out a thick, meticulously organized folder. Yes, my legal team. You see, they were quite concerned about the potential buyer's history of fraudulent dealings, especially given my position as the property owner. Timothy's fork clattered against his plate, the sound sharp in the stunned silence. What are you talking about? He sputtered. Oh, did I forget to mention? I laid the property deed on the table with a flourish, its crisp edges gleaming under the chandelier. I bought this house 2 years ago through a holding company, of course, when Great-Aunt Adelaide's estate was settled. Impossible. Father snapped, his face reddening. The house was tied up in the family trust. It wasn't for sale. The trust you borrowed against repeatedly to cover the firm's losses? I raised an eyebrow, my tone calm but cutting. The same trust you defaulted on last spring? The bank was quite happy to sell to a buyer with liquid assets and excellent credit. They particularly appreciated my cash offer. Mother's face had gone pale, her wine glass trembling in her hand. Catherine's phone slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the tablecloth. You're lying, Timothy stammered, his voice rising. This is some kind of joke. Would you like to see the documentation? I opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers. I have everything here. The deed, the transfer records, even the receipts for the property taxes I've been paying while letting you all live here rent-free. But your job, Mother whispered, her voice barely audible. You work in that little tech startup. I laughed softly, the sound carrying a hint of triumph. That little tech startup went public last year. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and one of the founding partners. Did none of you ever actually Google my company? We're valued at just over $4 billion. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft patter of snow against the windows. Outside, the world was blanketed in a pristine layer of white, covering the grounds I now legally owned. So, I continued, my voice steady, regarding that 1-week notice to vacate. I think 24 hours is more appropriate, don't you? After all, as Timothy so eloquently put it, progress demands change. Timothy's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. We're family. Family? I pulled out another document, my movements deliberate. Like when you forged my signature to access my trust fund last year. Or when you mortgaged this house to cover your gambling debts. His mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. Diane suddenly became very interested in the intricate pattern of her napkin. How did you? Father started, but I cut him off. I know everything, I said, my voice firm. Every loan, every fraud, every secret account. And after tomorrow, so will the SEC. The grandfather clock chimed again, its deep toll echoing through the stunned silence, marking the unraveling of the Bennett family's carefully constructed facade. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come, one that would shake the very foundation of our family to its core. Now, I said calmly, leaning forward, let's talk about what really happened to Great-Aunt Adelaide's original will, the one that mysteriously disappeared the night before she died, the one Timothy visited her about in the hospital. Timothy's face drained of color, shifting from red to ghostly white faster than I thought possible. He knew what was coming next would destroy not just his reputation, but everything he'd schemed and stolen to build. Maria quietly began clearing the untouched dinner plates, her movements precise and careful, like someone navigating a room full of cornered animals. The turkey had gone cold, forgotten in the wake of my revelations. The night before Great-Aunt Adelaide died, I continued, Pulling out a small USB drive, the hospital security cameras recorded something interesting. Would you like to see it, Timothy, or should I just describe how you threatened our dying aunt to change her will? Stop. Timothy's voice cracked, his perfectly pressed collar suddenly seeming to choke him. Why stop? I asked, my tone deceptively light. Isn't this what family dinners are for, sharing memories? I connected the USB drive to my tablet. The footage is quite clear, you entering her room at 11:42 p.m. The nurse's statement confirmed she heard you shouting something about deserving the inheritance more than your worthless sisters. Mother's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Timothy, what is she talking about? Nothing, he snapped, his voice desperate. She's making this up. Really? I turned the tablet screen toward them. Because the video shows you leaving with documents at 12:37 a.m. And exactly 6 hours later, Aunt Adelaide was dead, the original will mysteriously missing. The new one, hastily signed under suspicious circumstances, left everything to you. Catherine had gone very still, her eyes wide with realization. The inheritance, she whispered, the money you loaned me for my divorce settlement, was that stolen? I nodded, my voice softening slightly. All of it. From the estate, from my trust fund, from this house's equity. Timothy's been running a pyramid scheme for years, using family assets to cover his trading losses. Diane suddenly stood, her chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Sit down, I said firmly, my gaze locking onto hers. You helped him forge the documents. The SEC has your signatures, too. She sank back into her chair, the color draining from her face, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the tablecloth. You've been investigating us, Father said, his voice carrying more bewilderment than anger. Your own family. No, Father, I corrected. I've been protecting myself ever since I found the original will in Timothy's office safe 3 years ago. Timothy's head snapped up. You broke into my office? Actually, I said, a slight smile playing on my lips. Your secretary, Linda, let me in. Remember her? The one you fired for incompetence, when she threatened to expose your affair with the investor's liaison? She's been working for my tech company ever since, keeping excellent records. The sound of Mother's wine glass shattering against the floor made everyone jump. Maria moved to clean it up, but I raised a hand, stopping her. Leave it, I said softly. In fact, Maria, why don't you take the rest of the evening off? With full pay, of course. And don't worry about your job, you'll still have one after they're gone. You can't just, Father started, but I cut him off. Can't just what? Protect loyal employees? Make business decisions about my own property? Don't worry, Father, Maria's contract is ironclad, unlike the documentation Timothy used to embezzle from the family firm. I opened another folder, spreading out bank statements and transaction records across the table like a grotesque Christmas dinner centerpiece. 14 shell companies, I narrated, pointing to highlighted sections, 23 fraudulent accounts, over $12 million in misappropriated funds. Did you really think nobody would notice? I was protecting our legacy. Timothy shouted, his mask finally cracking. The firm was failing. Father's investments were worthless. Father's face had gone purple. What have you done? He demanded. What you taught me to do, Timothy snarled, his voice dripping with venom. Appearances matter more than anything, right? Keep up the family name at any cost. Cost, I laughed softly, the sound echoing in the tense room. Let's talk about cost. The cost of sending me to boarding school at 12 because I was difficult. The cost of cutting off my college fund because I chose tech instead of finance. The cost of believing Timothy's lies about my mental instability when I tried to warn you about his schemes. I stood, walking to the window, where the snow fell harder now, nature's curtain drawing across the estate I now controlled. But here's the real cost, I said, turning back to face them. Tomorrow morning, the SEC will receive documentation of every fraudulent transaction. The FBI will get proof of Timothy's involvement in Great-Aunt Adelaide's death. And the family firm will be revealed as the house of cards it's become. You'll destroy us, Mother whispered, her voice barely audible. No, Mother, I said, my tone resolute. You did that yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights. Catherine, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke, her voice trembling. What about me? My trust fund is gone. I nodded, my expression softening slightly. Timothy emptied it months ago, just like he did with mine, just like he's been doing with the firm's pension fund, by the way. Your new fiancé? He's been helping Timothy hide the money offshore. Catherine's face crumpled, another expensive engagement ring turning to dust before her eyes. But I'm not completely heartless, I continued, reaching into my briefcase. I've arranged for a small stipend for you, Catherine, enough to live modestly while you finally finish that degree you abandoned. And, Mother, there's a comfortable condo waiting in Palm Beach. Your social circle won't be quite as grand, but you won't be destitute. And me? Timothy's voice was barely audible, his bravado gone. I smiled, the same cold smile he'd given me countless times over the years. You get exactly what you deserve, a 6x8 cell with a lovely view of the exercise yard. Unless, of course, you'd like to make a deal. Hope flickered across his face, desperate and fleeting. What kind of deal? Tell them the truth, I said simply. All of it. About Adelaide, about the firm, about every scheme and lie. Give them closure before you go away. Timothy looked around the table, at our shell-shocked parents, at his trembling wife, at Catherine's tear-streaked face. For the first time in his life, he had no moves left to make. It started 6 years ago, he began, his voice shaking, when Father made me CEO. But what he revealed next would shake our family's foundation even more than my previous revelations, because Timothy's crimes went far beyond money. They struck at the very heart of what had torn our family apart decades ago. His confessions spilled out like poison from an old wound, each word making our mother flinch, our father age visibly, and Catherine's tears fall faster. The firm was already failing when Father made me CEO, he continued, staring at his hands. His investments in oil had tanked. The real estate venture in Dubai was a disaster. But we kept up appearances, using Adelaide's trust fund to cover the gaps. My sister's money, Father whispered, his voice hollow. You stole from my sister. You taught me well, Father, Timothy said, his laugh bitter and hollow. Remember when Alex was 12? When she found those irregularities in the family books. I remembered. It was the reason they'd sent me to boarding school, a difficult child in need of discipline, they'd said. In reality, I had discovered their first round of financial fraud. But that's not the worst part. Timothy's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. The night Adelaide died, she knew everything. She'd hired a forensic accountant, was planning to expose us all. Mother's face went ash-white. Us all, she whispered. Tell them, Father, Timothy said, his eyes taking on a strange, fevered gleam. Tell them who really started this, who taught me how to create shell companies, hide assets, manipulate accounts. Father stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. Be quiet, he roared. No, I cut in, my voice steady. Let him finish. Though I already know. I found your old records, Father, the ones hidden in the false bottom of your study drawer. Records going back 30 years. Catherine made a small, broken sound. Daddy? It was for the family, Father's voice cracked, his usual composure shattered. Everything I did was to maintain our position, our name. Including sending me away? I asked quietly. Including believing Timothy when he said I was unstable, turning the whole family against me when I tried to warn you about the firm's collapse? You were too smart, he whispered, his eyes haunted. Too observant. Just like Adelaide. The truth hung in the air like smoke, choking us all. So when she threatened to expose you, I continued, Timothy handled it, just like you taught him to handle problems. But he got sloppy, left evidence. I pulled out one final document, a hospital record showing elevated levels of potassium in Adelaide's last blood test, levels that couldn't be explained by her condition. Did you know about this part, Father? Did you know your son graduated from fraud to murder? Mother ran from the room, the sound of her retching echoing from the hallway. Diane sat frozen, her expensive manicure digging half-moons into her palms. I didn't, Father stumbled back, his voice breaking. Timothy, tell me you didn't. The family name, Timothy said, his voice eerily calm now above all else. Protect the family name. Your words, Father. Your lessons. I stood, gathering my documents, my movements deliberate and calm. The police will be here in approximately 10 minutes, I said. I called them before dinner. You're having us arrested on Christmas? Catherine's voice rose hysterically. No, Catherine, I said, softening my tone. I'm having Timothy and father arrested. You and mother have different consequences. I handed her an envelope. Your new apartment lease, first year paid, along with enrollment papers for the community college nearest your new home. Time to build a real life. She took the envelope with trembling hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. Why? Why help me? Because you were a victim, too, I said gently. Spoiled and enabled, yes, but not criminal. Not like them. The sound of sirens grew in the distance, their wail cutting through the snowy silence. Timothy made a move toward the door, but I pulled out my phone. The house is surrounded, I said. My security team has been in place all evening. Security team? Diane finally spoke, her voice trembling. Did you really think I'd confront financial fraudsters and a murderer without protection? I smiled slightly. I learned something from this family. After all, always have a backup plan. The front door opened, and heavy footsteps filled the hallway. 2 police detectives entered the dining room, followed by FBI agents, their badges glinting in the dim light. Mr. Bennett, Mr. Timothy Bennett, the lead detective announced, his voice firm. You're under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and, in your case, Timothy, the suspected murder of Adelaide Bennett. As they read them their rights, Mother returned, leaning heavily against the door frame, her face ashen. I walked to her, holding out another envelope. The condo in Palm Beach, I said softly. It's peaceful, far from all of this. There's enough money in the account I've set up to live comfortably, if not extravagantly. Why? She whispered, her voice breaking. After everything we did to you? Because hate takes too much energy, I said, my voice steady but not unkind, and I'd rather use mine building something new. As they led father and Timothy away in handcuffs, I walked to the window, watching the snow blanket their footprints, erasing all trace of their passage from my property. 3 months later, I stood in the same dining room, but everything had changed. The heavy velvet drapes had been replaced with light, airy panels that let the sunlight stream in. The oppressive oil paintings of stern Bennett ancestors had given way to vibrant works by local artists, their colors breathing life into the once stifling space. The room was filled with the sound of children's laughter, a stark contrast to the cold family dinners of the past. I'd converted the mansion into the Bennett Technology Education Center, a haven for underprivileged youth. The same rooms that once hosted bitter arguments and hidden schemes now buzzed with activity, coding classes, robotics workshops, and entrepreneurship seminars. Maria still ran the household, but now as the center's operations manager, with a generous salary and full benefits that reflected her true worth after years of loyalty. Catherine had completed her first semester of community college, earning straight A's in her social work program, determined to help other families avoid the mistakes that had torn ours apart. Mother was finding peace in Palm Beach, volunteering at a local library and discovering an unexpected talent for telling stories to children, her once rigid demeanor softening in the warmth of a quieter life. Timothy and father were serving their sentences, 20 years for Timothy, 12 for father. Diane had filed for divorce and turned state's evidence, receiving probation in exchange for her cooperation. The family firm had been dissolved, its legitimate assets used to repay the victims of their fraud. The Bennett name no longer carried weight in financial circles, but I was building a new legacy, one rooted in innovation, education, and genuine value. I sat in my office, once father's study, reading the latest update from the Education Center's program director. Enrollment had doubled, and our first class of coding students was already receiving job offers from top tech companies. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine, got my midterm results. All A's again. Thank you for the second chance. I smiled, looking out at the grounds where children now played in the snow, their laughter replacing the echoes of old arguments and older lies. On my desk sat a small, framed photo of Great Aunt Adelaide, her eyes twinkling with the same love of truth and justice that had ultimately cost her life, but had also sparked the change I was now bringing to fruition. "The house is still in the family," I told her picture quietly, "just a different kind of family now, a better one." The snow began to fall again, each flake a promise of renewal rather than burial. I'd learned that the best revenge isn't destroying what others built, it's building something better in its place. As evening fell, I walked the halls of the Bennett Technology Education Center, listening to the happy chatter of the last students leaving for the day. In the dining room, a group of teenage girls was finishing a coding project, their laptops occupying the same space where that fateful Christmas dinner had shattered my family's illusions. One of them looked up, her eyes bright with determination. "Miss Bennett, can you help us with this algorithm?" I sat down at the table, right where I had sat 3 months ago, but this time surrounded by hope rather than hostility. "Of course," I said, smiling warmly. "Let's build something amazing." Because that's what real power is, not the ability to destroy, but the strength to create something new from the ashes of what was lost. And in that, I had finally found my true inheritance. Before heading to the board meeting that afternoon, I made one crucial stop. The small coffee shop on Oak Street looked exactly as it had 15 years ago, its warm, cozy interior a stark contrast to the snowy world outside. Martha, my grandmother's best friend and the former head of accounting at Bennett Industries, sat at our usual corner table, her sharp eyes softening as she saw me approach. "I wondered when you'd visit today," she said, smiling as she pushed a steaming cup of coffee toward me. At 78, her mind was as sharp as ever, her presence a comforting reminder of the lessons that had shaped me. "It's time, isn't it?" I nodded, settling into the chair across from her. "They never knew it was you who taught me how to read corporate financial statements when I was 16, I said, my voice tinged with gratitude, "or that you helped me understand what they were really doing with the company." Martha had been the one who opened my eyes all those years ago, showing me how my father and Timothy manipulated numbers, hid losses, and played fast and loose with investor funds. She'd been forced into early retirement when she threatened to report their practices, but her mentorship had given me the tools to fight back. "Your grandmother would be proud," Martha said softly, her eyes glinting with emotion. "She always said you were the one who truly understood the value of things." I touched the emerald pendant at my neck, my grandmother's last gift before she passed, a symbol of her faith in me. They're about to learn exactly how much I understood. At precisely 1:55 p.m., I walked into the main conference room of Bennett Industries. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Board members sat rigid in their high-backed chairs, papers spread before them like battle plans. My father stood at the head of the table, trying to project confidence, but the strain in his eyes betrayed him. Timothy slouched in a corner, his usual smirk replaced by barely concealed panic. Mother sat near the door, her designer outfit slightly less impeccable than usual, likely because she'd spent the morning discovering just how many of her social connections relied on my anonymous donations to her charitable causes. "Let's begin," I said clearly, taking a seat directly opposite my father. This meeting was called, Father started, but I cut him off, my voice calm but unyielding. This meeting was called because I triggered the shareholder rights clause, requiring disclosure of significant ownership changes. I opened my laptop, the screen casting a soft glow across the room. "Shall we look at the numbers?" The projector hummed to life, displaying a complex web of shell companies, investment vehicles, and stock transfers, a tapestry of careful acquisition woven over 3 years, all leading to this moment. As of this morning, I continued, my voice steady, these entities collectively own 47% of Bennett Industries voting shares. The room erupted in murmurs, ripple of shock spreading across the board members' faces. Father gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "That's impossible," Timothy burst out, his voice shrill. "The family trust controls the majority shares." "Correction," I said, a slight smile playing on my lips. "The family trust controlled the majority shares until you used them as collateral for your failed Pacific Shores development project last year, a project that, coincidentally, was purchased at bankruptcy auction by one of my investment groups." Timothy went pale, his bravado crumbling. How did you? Unlike you, I said, my tone sharp but controlled. I actually read the financial reports. All of them, including the ones you tried to bury. I turned to the board members, my gaze steady. Would anyone like to see the real numbers from the last 3 years? The ones that don't appear in the official statements. This is blackmail. Father snapped, his voice trembling with rage. No, I said, standing slowly, my presence commanding the room. This is business. You taught me that, remember? Everything's negotiable. Everything has a price. What do you want? A board member asked, his voice shaking slightly. Transparency, accountability, I said, pausing to meet my father's eyes, and a change in leadership. You can't seriously expect, Timothy started, but I cut him off. Actually, I can. Because in addition to my shares, I also hold proxy voting rights for the Miller Group. I let that sink in, watching the realization dawn on their faces. The Miller Group, our largest institutional investor, controlled another 15% of shares. Catherine Miller is a personal friend, I continued. She's also a businesswoman who recognizes competence over nepotism. She's aware of certain irregularities in the company's handling of her investments, irregularities that I've documented extensively. The room fell silent, the weight of years of mismanagement, hidden losses, and questionable deals settling over us like a fog. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly, my voice cutting through the tension. The board will appoint an independent audit committee. Timothy will resign from all operational roles. And, Father, I met his eyes, unflinching. You'll announce your retirement today. Or what? He challenged, but his voice lacked conviction. Or I call the SEC, I said simply. I'm sure they'd be very interested in the real story behind the Wilson Holdings collapse, the Thompson development deal, and about a dozen other transactions I've documented. Mother stood suddenly, her voice pleading. Alexander, please. This is your family. Family? I turned to her, my tone sharp but controlled. Was it family when you watched Father crush every initiative I brought to the company? When you stayed silent as Timothy took credit for my work? When you threatened to disown me if I didn't give up my house? She flinched, her eyes filling with tears. I learned what family meant from Grandma, I continued, my voice softening slightly, and from people like Martha Stevens. You remember her, don't you, Father? The accountant you forced out because she wouldn't cook the books. Father's face contorted, a mix of anger and fear. Martha? She's been helping you. She taught me to see what was really happening in this company, I said, my voice steady. And now everyone else will see it too. I distributed folders to each board member, their weight heavy with the truth. These contain my formal proposal for restructuring Bennett Industries. You'll find it addresses the company's actual financial position, not the one shown in public statements. The next 2 hours were a blur of legal discussions, votes, and resolutions. By the end, the transformation was complete. Father announced his retirement, citing health reasons, his voice hollow as he read the prepared statement. Timothy was removed from all operational roles, his arrogance shattered. And I became the executive chairperson of the board, with a mandate to reform the company's governance and operations. As the board members filed out, Father remained seated, staring at the papers in front of him, his hands trembling. I never thought, he began, that I could do this. I finished, my voice calm but firm. That's been the problem all along. What happens now? Timothy asked, his arrogance gone, replaced by a hollow resignation. Now, I said, you'll retain your shares, but have no operational control. Father will have a comfortable retirement, provided he stays out of company business. And Mother, I turned to her, the foundation's funding is secure, but its board will be independently managed. And the mansion? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Keep it, I said, a slight smile tugging at my lips. Consider it a reminder that sometimes the child you underestimate the most becomes the one you answer to. I gathered my things, pausing at the door. Oh, and Timothy, I added, turning back, I bought the Thompson Development Group this morning. Turns out, they were eager to sell once they realized who they were really dealing with. The sun was setting as I drove home to my house, the one I'd refused to sell, the one that had sparked this entire confrontation. Martha was waiting on my porch, a bottle of champagne in hand, her smile warm and knowing. "Your grandmother kept a letter for you," she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "She asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I think today qualifies." The letter was short, written in my grandmother's elegant hand. "My dearest Alexandra," it began, "I've watched you grow into someone extraordinary, someone who sees beyond the surface of things. The emerald pendant I gave you isn't just jewelry. It's the key to a trust one established years ago, one your father knows nothing about. Martha will explain everything. You've proven you know how to build things. Now show them how to build something better than they ever imagined. All my love, Grandma." I touched the pendant again, understanding finally dawning. Martha smiled, her eyes bright with pride. "Ready to hear about your grandmother's real legacy?" I nodded, opening my door to welcome her in. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about tearing things down. It's about building something new from the ashes of what they never valued. And as for that house they wanted me to sell, it was never about the property. It was about standing my ground, about refusing to be pushed aside one more time. The next morning, a single email went out to all Bennett Industries employees. "Change isn't always comfortable," it read, "but it's often necessary. Together, we're going to build something extraordinary, and this time, everyone's voice will matter. Regards, Alexander Bennett, Executive Chairperson, Bennett Industries." Sometimes, the biggest victories come not from the battles we win, but from the lessons we teach along the way. My family had spent years teaching me that I wasn't enough. In the end, I taught them that I was more than they ever imagined. And that house they wanted so badly? I think I'll keep it after all. It's got a perfect view of the Bennett Industries Tower, a daily reminder that sometimes the best response to "we don't want you" is to become the person they can't ignore. Martha raised her champagne glass, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Dear grandmother." "To the future," I corrected, smiling as I clinked my glass against hers. "And to remembering that some things aren't for sale. Not houses, not principles, and definitely not self-worth." The sun set over the city skyline, painting the sky in shades of victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to reshape the company, to build something worthy of the legacy my grandmother had entrusted to me. But for now, sitting in the house I'd refused to give up, I was exactly where I needed to be. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing them exactly who you've become while they were busy underestimating you. And I was just getting started. Please feel free to comment below if you liked this. Remember to like and subscribers for more.